Welcome to the first Republican gubernatorial primary debate of 1993. I'm Michael Aron of NJN News. This debate is co-sponsored by the New Jersey State Chamber of Commerce and NJN, the New Jersey channel. We have an audience of about 500 for the debate, and let me introduce you to the candidates. Starting left to right, Christine Whitman, former president of the Board of Public Utilities from Oldwick in Hunterdon County. Jim Wallwork, former state senator from Far Hills in Somerset County. And Cary Edwards, former state attorney general from Oakland in Bergen County. The format of this debate is deliberately loose and unstructured. The candidates are going to be free to interject comments when they wish, to respond to one another. They are going to have opening statements and closing statements. My job as moderator is to pose questions to them, to moderate the discussion, and to make sure that they get roughly equal time, or as best I can do. We're going to start now with opening statements, and by a toss of the coin, Mrs. Whitman goes first. You have 60 seconds, Christine Whitman.
Thank you, Michael. I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce and NJN for hosting tonight's debate. I'm running for governor because I care deeply about New Jersey. And as I've traveled across this state over the last 3.5 years, I've talked and listened to the citizens, and I've heard the fear in their voice, fear for the future. We must have change, but not change that's simply more of the same. We must have change that takes government and creates a better government to manage. As I look to the future and look to the kind of government we want, I want to share with you tonight my ideas for that kind of change. Change that brings people into the process. The kind of change that comes from leadership that's based on conviction and the courage to defy politics as usual. I come to this race with no IOUs, and when I enter the governor's office, the only thing that comes in with me is you, the people of New Jersey.
Thank you, Mrs. Whitman. The next opening statement goes to Cary Edwards.
Michael, thank you very much, and thank the Chamber of Commerce, NJN, for having us all here this evening. This is one of the first and the beginning opportunities, I think, for we as candidates to begin to point out the real differences, I think, that exist in this race between us. For this is an important race. The governor of the state of New Jersey is the most powerful chief executive in this nation. The decisions the governor makes is about the life and death of real people. It's about people on the streets of New York who don't have a job. It's about the Smith family who has lost their job and hasn't had work for a year and is having their house foreclosed. It's about Mrs. Flood from South Orange who was shot and had her car carjacked. It's about children in schools growing up and graduating from high schools who don't have the education that they need to get a job and to really survive. So it's an important decision that you, the voters of New Jersey, have to make, first in this primary and then in November. I have a plan for New Jersey's future. The ideas, the experience, and the capacity. We're here today to talk to you and to get your vote, and I hope you'll enjoy this program as much as I will.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Finally, for an opening statement, former Senator Jim Wallwork.
Thank you, Aaron. Ladies and gentlemen of New Jersey, I'm running for governor because I want to get government off people's backs and out of their wallets. I'm a conservative businessman, and I'm proud to be a conservative because I want to have less government, less spending, and less taxes in New Jersey. I'm the only candidate pledged to repeal the $2.2 billion increase that Florio put on the taxpayers of the state of New Jersey. We can do that working together with a 4% cut each year in the $15 billion budget. And as a conservative businessman, I know I can do it. I know I can manage that. Beyond that, I want to have fixed terms for public officials. I think that 12 and out is very important to have the politicians go back to the private sector and live under the very laws that they've enacted. I want initiative and referendum to bring the public back into their government. People feel turned off by their government. We have to change that. Initiative and referendum will do that. I want a free market system for automobile insurance, competition, so that we can make sure that the automobile insurance program is a good one.
I have to stop you there, okay, Senator. The 60 seconds are up. All right, now we're going to start talking about the issues, and we're going to start with tax and fiscal policy. And again, by a toss of a coin, Cary Edwards, the first question. The $2.8 billion that Governor Florio added in taxes that Mr. Wallwork alluded to a minute ago have been the central fact of political life in this state for the last 3 years. We heard Senator Wallwork say he would repeal the thing. Mrs. Whitman has said it's a goal of hers to repeal the remaining $2.2 billion. You want a small cut in the income tax, but you have not pledged to roll back the entire remaining $2.2 billion in taxes. Is that because it's unrealistic in your view?
You have to take the world where it really is, Mike, and the world today is different than the world of 1990. We have the highest unemployment rate in this nation, the worst economy in this nation. We've got fear on our streets and a school system that's failing. We have to create jobs in New Jersey. We need growth in order to be able to stop the gimmicking spending that's going on right now in order to balance our budgets as the Constitution requires. My plan is to cut taxes and cut them now. We can't afford to wait till a new governor is elected, because those tax cuts won't be effective till January of 1995. That's a day late and a dime short. 4 taxes: a reduction of the income tax right now, a research and development tax credit right now, an investment tax credit right now, and a reduction in the double taxation of small businesses. That, I believe, and the legislature has said they plan to cut $500 million out of this budget, and I think they should do it now. I'm not making promises. These aren't goals. These aren't objectives. The public will be able to measure the effectiveness of my policies and programs, and they'll be able to do it on November 2nd with those policies and programs in place, if I can continue to convince the legislature to move in that direction.
All right, let me ask Mrs. Whitman. You have said it's a goal.
Absolutely, because I believe very firmly if you don't have goals, you don't institute the discipline necessary to get there. We've seen what's happened to New Jersey over the last 3.5 years because of these tax increases. There's no question in my mind about that. But there are 2 things we have to do in order to meet this need. We have to both cut government spending and the size of government, and we also have to increase and stimulate the private sector. The public sector is not going to create the kind of jobs we need to make New Jersey strong again. That's going to come from the private sector, and the private sector can't do its job until government gets out of the way. That's what's got to happen. That's why it's a goal.
Well, let's start hearing where we're going to cut government. Senator, you're the one who's pledging to roll back everything. Give me some big ticket items that you're going to cut out of state spending.
Well, first of all, Michael, I'm the only businessman running in this race. I'm the only one that's provided jobs in the private sector because I've run a business successfully over the last 25 years. So I've dealt with the bureaucracy. I've dealt with the Division of Taxation, Department of Transportation, the DEP. I've removed tanks out of the ground. So I know what is strangling the businessmen of this state and the businesswomen, and that's the unnecessary rules and regulations. The day after I'm elected governor, I'm going to have a task force of qualified men and women, and we're going to strip out all the unnecessary rules and regulations that are stifling business here in the state of New Jersey.
Name one regulation you'll do away with.
Well, in the DEP, as an example, I was talking to a restaurateur down in Monmouth County. He was fined $16,000 because his engineer made a water quality inspection late. A month late. There was nothing wrong with the water, but he fined $16,000 and $90 for the test. This is outrageous, and this is driving business out of the state of New Jersey. Now, what I intend to do is to have a Grace Committee type of task force to ferret out waste and mismanagement in government. That's the first step. We had the Governor's Management Improvement Program in 1984. $1.5 billion was put on the table in cuts in state government. Only $500 million was made back in 1985. That will be the beginning of my formation of how we're going to reduce taxes and reduce spending, and that's what we have to do to stimulate private sector jobs.
Mr. Edwards, you want to jump in?
Michael, the executive branch of state government is a 65,000 employee, $15 billion service business. It's too much, and we're taxed too much. It's not efficient, it's not effective, but nobody knows where to cut it. We know there are 1,500 middle management employees that have to go, but nobody can tell you which employee has to go. We know we got a sweet potato council and we got a white potato council. We know DMV regulates golf carts. That's ridiculous, but those aren't big numbers. We need to do, and Texas did this, they installed a performance auditing system of an auditor chosen by the taxpayers, the same way a private business does. A private business, the auditor for that business, permanent, not commissions. Every new governor's got a commission. Every new governor's got an audit. Institutionally, we need to know exactly what things cost by putting a performance audit in place. Now, I have called for the direct election of a state auditor. There are 1,500 middle management people I'll cut out. I'll cut 10% of direct state services at $460 million. But I want facts to do that on, and I want facts there every year. Texas cut 10% of its $30 billion budget. If we do that in New Jersey, it would be $1.5 billion, and it should be done every year.
Let me stop you there and turn to Mrs. Whitman. You're all calling for audits, and you're all calling for cutting
No, I'm
fat.
not.
He's not calling for audit.
I'm not calling for an audit. I'm going to use the line item veto as governor.
Well, that's nice, but I believe we have got to...
Where are you going to cut, and what do you think of the elected auditor suggestion of Cary Edwards?
Well, as you know, Michael, I believe that that is a traditional kind of response to the problems we have, which is adding another layer of government. We have all the tools we need right now, Cary, to do it. You can contract out to do audits. That's what needs to happen.
Right now, you don't know what you're talking about.
Excuse me.
$5 million we pay for it.
Well, then why don't you get him to do his job? But we can do outside, too. You want to put... Of course, it was a Republican woman in Texas. I will give you that. Republican women seem to do a pretty good job of cutting. But we have got to have... That's right. We have got to have, and that's what I've called for again and again, we have got to have that audit that tells us not just how much we're spending, but how we're spending it, where we're spending it, why we're spending it. We can sit here and give you all sorts of numbers. I mean, I could say that if you put 36% of Medicaid recipients into an HMO, you'd save $42 million a year, and that's a nice big number. But do we have enough HMOs to accommodate them? Is that creating a two-tier health system of health care? Those are the decisions, and those are policy decisions, and then you can make the
hasn't Jim Florio done an audit?
No.
He's had a governor's management review commission.
It's a commission just like the MIP was a commission, just like Brendan Byrne had one, just like Bill Cahill had one, just like Senator Wallwork wants one.
Well, I have one when I'm governor, but beyond that, Michael, here's the point. We have a lot of politicians that are in jobs in state government today. You can start with the Violent Crimes Compensation Board. 5 people, each person on that board getting $80,000 a year. They dispense $3 million, but they're spending $2 million on their pensions and on their salaries. That board ought to be done away with as an example, and let the money then flow to the hospitals where they can take care of the people who are victims of violent crime, stabbings, shootings, and muggings, and so forth. The Division of Consumer Affairs, they have 34 people in the main staff. They used to have 14. They have 4 people now in the Division of Consumer Affairs for public relations. They used to have 1. The job goes on and on.
We can find small. We can find small.
No, they're not
Let's
small.
talk about it.
We're going to go after the pensions. We're going to go after the political pension system. The politicians' pension program is like a golden trough, and hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars.
You're going to cut pensions of legislators?
No, well, I like to practically, but the political, look, the prosecutor of Essex County a few years ago gets $125,000. He was found on a legislative hidden payroll at $1,400 a year, building up a pension. The end of 30 years, you get the 3 highest years of your state service.
Wait a minute.
$125,000 is $62,500.
Okay, well, Mr. Edwards.
Now we're going to go after those pensions.
Then I want to change the subject.
There are vital services the state of New Jersey renders. We need to know, that's not one, but we need to know in an informed way, which we don't know, exactly where our tax dollars are being spent so we can make informed judgments. And I've been there, believe me, and I've made mistakes, and I've had the successes, and I've reacted to the bizarre or to the scandal. But we don't have one measurement anywhere in state government that tells us what we get for our tax dollars, and we need that institutionally so the public can make an intelligent decision. Jim Florio cut across the board. He didn't have a state police class for 3 years, and crime goes up because he cuts across the board. You can't do it with a...
We'll get to crime. Do you want to make...
I was talking about crime.
Well, yes, because another part of what you've got to do is you've got to have performance-based budgeting. We have to set up some way so we can judge, are our agencies doing for us what we want them to do for us, not to us, which they think they ought to do to us. And we've got to have measurable standards so that each year we're funding agencies not on the basis of failed programs, but on successes. And we have got to look where we can introduce the private sector into government for competition and privatization. That's where you're going to have the biggest savings over time.
Let me ask another...
Michael,
excuse me, Senator. I want to move forward. Let's talk about some of the big ticket items that the income tax hike went to fund, like school aid. If you're going to repeal the rest of the Florio tax hikes, are you going to cut back on school aid or on municipal aid? Senator Wallwork and Mrs. Whitman.
Well, we're spending enough money on schools in New Jersey today. The problem is we're not getting 100 cents on the dollar.
Are you going to cut back on school aid, Senator?
I think that we're going to have to audit into the urban schools, make sure that the money is being spent wisely and well. I want to make sure that the money is reaching the classroom. It's being siphoned off in the educational bureaucracy. In the city of Newark, and incidentally, I represented Newark for 8 of my 16 years in the legislature, they have a $535 billion budget. 85% of that is coming from the taxpayers at large in New Jersey and from the federal monies. 15% from Newark. We're paying for an education, but the kids are not receiving the education in the classroom because of the educational bureaucracy. I think the state should step in and take over at least the bureaucracy and straighten the mess out and help the kids in the class and get a good student in the classroom with a good teacher and a good principal.
I was going to raise that later, but as long as you've raised it now...
Well, we want to, and we have to involve the parents.
As long as you've raised it now, Cary Edwards, where do you stand on the state taking over the Newark schools, something that's being talked about very seriously right now?
Well, if the school system is failing, we put a system in place in the state of New Jersey years ago to take them over. And there are measurements to that, and the Newark school system that doesn't pass it should get taken over. If it's failing to meet the needs of the kids and it's politicized and it meets those criteria, they were very carefully put in place. And as a matter of fact, I gave a legal opinion back in 1987 about the powers of the state to do that. But the issue is that $11.1 billion of the state budget, of a $15.7 billion budget, is state aid. The services are only 4.6 of that. If you're going to reduce $2.2 billion, you've got to get it from state aid. You've got to cut school aid.
But you're also missing, I believe we're also missing a point here, because we're not going to cut our way to $2.2 billion. We have got to see economic growth at the same time. That's why it's so important that we have the kind of regulatory reform that stops strangling our business, that we provide the tax incentives that encourages small business to start up in this state and keep the businesses we have here in this state.
Christine, if you feel that way, why don't you support the tax cut now?
Cary, I'd be happy to do it.
A business tax cut right now. You said you don't support that.
I never did. Cary, you keep putting words in my mouth. You've done it about 15 times. I never said I didn't support that.
Excuse me one second.
I haven't said that.
I do want to hear from Mrs. Whitman on whether you oppose or favor a state takeover of the Newark school system.
I would favor a state takeover of the Newark school system if that system has not met the criteria set up that provides for state takeover. And as you may know, this administration even changed the steps necessary to get to the takeover procedure and made it more difficult for the state to take over. So if the reports are as bad as I hear they are, then education is about our future. We cannot worry about whether it offends somebody's feelings to take over that system. We've got to make that system work, because that's our future there.
Michael, there's no ands, ifs, or buts. The system is failing. It's got to be taken over. At least the educational bureaucracy cleared out. Everybody knows that. Everybody's waltzing around. I'm the only one to take a position, and I said it 2 or 3 weeks ago that the Newark public school system should be taken over. But I think we do want to come back to the jobs and the economy end of it, because that's really the taxes, the high taxes that people are paying. This person, I know we can cut. Every working family in New Jersey has had to do it. Christy Whitman, when she was freeholder in Somerset County, took the budget from $50 million up to $95 million.
And the tax rate before the 5 years of the rate went down, Cary, and that's why it went up. People moved into county.
I live in Somerset County, and it didn't go down. I have a business in Somerset County, and I paid more taxes.
You know, for two businessmen,
nobody's tax bill.
The county tax rate went down, and what happened was people, it hasn't happened in this state in 3.5 years.
Michael, they did job in freeholders. They raised their salary 4 times in 5 years, and Mrs. Whitman voted 4 times to raise her salary from, I think it was $13,000 up to $16,200.
Well, the other thing I like about this, Jim, is you say that we raised taxes, and the tax rate did go down. You may not like it, but it did.
Mine didn't.
Well, but if that is something bad, that may be where you live. I can't say about that.
I don't have a farmland assessment.
Well, you should if you have a farm. But don't forget, Jim, what is your response? I mean, you raised taxes. You voted for 6 out of 8 possible tax increases in the years 72 to 73 when you were there in the legislature.
Well, I was there 16 years, Christy.
6 out of 8 taxes you voted to raise on small business. What about
the other 14 years?
Well, you didn't get much
I have a record down there of being a very hardline person. I fought the income tax every inch of the way when Byrne finally put it through. I had a 79-point program, and some of those programs, incidentally, Michael, are very good today because I had the two-step bid process that Florio is talking about now for professional services.
All right, we may get to that too.
I have said very specifically what taxes I want cut and how much I want that cut to be and how much I want that cut in spending fee, and it needs to be done now. This state is sick. It's broken. It needs to be fixed. We can't wait to elect any of us governor. It's not pie in the sky. I'm not proffering what some goal or some objective. There's a difference between myself and Mrs. Whitman on this particular issue, and she won't acknowledge it.
All right,
and she should acknowledge it.
Let's get a last word from Mrs. Whitman then on this subject before we change the subject.
I want to hear what the difference is, because,
all right, what is the difference?
I support the R&D tax credit, and I have for ages.
The difference is, I said
the S-Corp
very clearly.
And those are pieces of legislation, that are working their way through now, and I'm not afraid to give this legislature, the Republicans in this legislature, the credit they deserve for putting those things on the table. They've been there, and they're working their way through now.
In January, when Governor Florio announced his budget, I called for those 4 taxes to be cut because this economy was in trouble and we need growth and we need to move it forward. We can't wait to elect a new governor. Christine Todd Whitman said we should not pass those taxes now. We should put that money into surplus because we're using gimmicks to move the budget forward. Well, you ain't seen nothing
yet.
I know
you did agree with the Florio taxes in principle.
Till she has to sit down, as I did, in the middle of a recession and draft a budget when revenues are in fact falling. And I've had to do that. And she hasn't.
Well, listen,
I'm sorry, Michael, Senator, I'm sorry. I want to move on. I'm going to pose.
Well, can I
all right, go ahead. Very quickly, please.
One quick point, because, Christie talks about targeted tax cuts. I'm against targeted tax cuts. That's an elitist type of an approach to government. What we need are tax cuts across the board. As a conservative businessman, I know that people want a level playing field. They want to make sure that they have certainty. Targeted tax cuts are not good. It's the liberal way. That's what Bill Clinton's proposing down in Washington, and I'm against it. I think we want tax cuts across the board for business, and we want it for the working men and women.
Let me move on. Let's talk about education. If we're not going to cut school aid, if we're going to cut taxes, but we're not going to cut school aid, let me ask you, Senator Wallwork, what are you going to do to improve public education in the state of New Jersey?
Well, I think, Michael, that attitudes are just as important as money. And I want to see talented teachers in the classroom, and I want teachers given the opportunity to teach. There are too many stifling rules and regulations, even imposed by the state, on the teachers' programs teaching. So we're going to change the rules and regulations and let the teachers teach and let the principals do what they should do. But we have to have an outreach program to reach into many of the urban centers, especially in other places around the state, because kids are coming into the classroom not in a frame of mind to learn. And that's bad, because we have to involve their parents. Kids need to have parent backup. They need to have reading at home. They need loving care at home. I want to change that with an outreach program. I want to have a program for teachers where we can reward successful teachers and give them a bonus or type of incentive. And we have to cut down on classroom discipline and make sure we have good order in the classroom.
Let me stop you there and ask Mrs. Whitman, why would the public schools do better under you than they have under Florio or these other gentlemen here?
That wouldn't be very hard. The first thing we have to do is take politics out of the public education system. I have called for, and I have a blueprint for better education in the state of New Jersey, putting the commissioner back on a 5-year term to get it out of the political cycle. And then we have got to establish core curricula standards, so it doesn't matter whether a child goes to school in Princeton or Patterson or Passaic. They get the same basic level of education, and that education is good enough that after 4 years of high school, they don't just get a piece of paper. They are able to go out and either get a self-supporting job or go on to further education and be mainstream, because that's where we're failing our children, and we've got to be willing to test to that and hold them accountable. There's enough money in the system to pay for good education now, but we have not had any accountability.
I think that's a difference between you and Cary Edwards, so I want to hear Mr. Edwards respond. You propose a statewide core curriculum, and I think your education plan calls for letting all the decisions be made in the local school districts and returning all decision-making to the local districts.
No, not at all, Mike. I think there's a fundamental difference between the two of us. I've been around long enough and experienced enough in the education world to know that the Thorough and Efficient Education Act of 1976 and how it's been implemented has not been a success. We need fundamental change, and I invite the listeners here and the people in this audience and people all over New Jersey to read that program carefully. It is about converting from a state-run school system with mandates coming down to the state helping each district and each neighborhood in this state design a unique school to meet the character and quality of the kids in that neighborhood. The kids in the Central Ward in Newark are different than the kids in Short Hills. It is a program, is a fundamental change in education in New Jersey. I understand how the public school system works in the state. I'm not for a voucher program to start for private school students across New Jersey. We can't even agree on paying what we should pay for public school students. It's a but it's very important, Michael. On that. It's a fundamental difference, and it takes some insight and some ideas and some understanding of how that public school system works. And frankly, Mrs. Whitman doesn't understand how our public school system works.
Let's try to keep the applause to a minimum if we can. Mrs. Whitman, Mr. Edwards' raising plan does call for a pilot program.
In
vouchers.
And you know why, Michael?
Explain why you're for that.
You know why I'm for that? Because I believe in choice within the public school system. The most important thing we've got to do is ensure that our public school system is the best it can be. And I believe that choice in the public school system really can make a difference. We have it in 3 districts here in New Jersey, and it's working well. But the reason I support vouchers as pilot projects in special needs districts where desired, i.e. in Jersey City, where Brett Schundler has asked for that ability, we ought to let him do it. And that's in response to what I've heard said to me from mothers of children in special needs district in Newark, for instance. A mother said to me, it doesn't do me any good if you give me choice within this public school system. The whole system's failing me.
Doesn't it hurt the public schools if you go to vouchers? That's the criticism of vouchers.
Well, you have Milwaukee where it's been used. You have Indianapolis where it's been used and the public systems haven't gone downhill. You even have the state of Maryland, which for the first time in this year's budget is including vouchers. It's worth trying because our systems are failing.
We have to be about
for our children.
I should explain that vouchers enable children to go to private
or religious
schools at public expense. Senator Wallwork, what's your position on vouchers?
Well, Michael, as a father of a daughter who went through the public schools and a private school and attended college here in New Jersey, I've seen the gamut. And I want to make sure that the parents and the students have as many opportunities as they possibly have. Certainly, I think all of us can agree that we would have a voucher system for the public schools, and I don't think that that would be bad because I think that the teachers and the students would gravitate toward a good school, and if you had a bad school, then you'd change the principal, put a good principal in there to straighten that school out and bring that school that the people were leaving to a good quality. So far as I'm concerned on vouchers for religious schools and private schools, I'm a firm believer of initiative and referendum. I think that that should be debated, and I think that's a good opportunity for the public's voice to be heard as to what they want to do in a program like that. And as governor, I would certainly want to hear from the public on how they want to do a voucher for private schools.
In 2 more minutes, what's the central difference between you all and your approach to public schools?
Very simple. I want choice in public schools, but I want to use charter schools within the public school system to do that. I want the teachers and the principals and the parents to work with the State Department of Education and the Commissioner of Education to design a unique school for that system and then put a charter school in that special needs district in the public school system that's chartered based on how that community would design a school if it could. And let those two sit there and compete. I do not, and it is a disaster. Mrs. Whitman wrote a column 2 years ago opposing choice when George Bush was proposing it nationally. Now she's for choice, for vouchers in the public schools, in the private school system. That's just wrong. That destroys public education in New Jersey. My kids go to public school. One of them has already graduated from there. We as a people in this state must protect the integrity of that public school education system and make it work for kids.
I'm very glad.
Please. Do you want to respond to that?
Yes, and I'm very glad, Cary, that you brought up that, because that's where my heart is. I have always been concerned about supporting the public school system. That's the most important thing. But
maybe
we have
vote
got
in the public school election.
Well, you might do it regularly too. Try general elections and primaries too, Cary. Those help. But we have got to support the public school system. However, I have talked to enough parents within the public school system who tell me, you're doing me no favors if you don't let me choice within the public school system. If the entire system is failing, doesn't do those parents any good and doesn't do those children any good, and that's what this is all about.
That's because you don't understand charter school.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Cary,
I'm
come
sorry.
on.
It's time to move on.
Let me make one final comment, because I don't think I've had enough. As a business person, I know how important it is for people to have the basics in education. If I have a person coming in to be employed, if they're strong in reading, writing, arithmetic, the basic skills, business and industry can train those people. So I am a firm believer of giving kids in the early grades special attention so you can build a good, firm foundation. Early grades, as soon as those kids in the first, second, and third grade can have success, they can build on success, build on a firm foundation, then we get them going in the right direction. So I'm an advocate of early special attention to make sure that we're building on a good, solid base and then grow from there.
All right, Senator. At this point, let's turn to crime. It's another issue that the three of you have been talking about. Two of you have put out detailed plans to attack crime, Mr. Edwards and Mrs. Whitman. And Mrs. Whitman, let me begin with you. Mr. Edwards says that because he was the chief law enforcement officer of the state of New Jersey, he has more expertise in this area. Would you acknowledge that he has more expertise and might do better at reducing the crime rate, which I think everybody agrees is too high?
Well, Michael, he has said repeatedly that if he can't bring down the crime rate, I mean, that's what his goal is. He shouldn't be governor. And if you look at the time when he was, in fact, the chief law enforcement officer of the state of New Jersey, and look at the New Jersey Unified Crime Reports, crime went up 9%. In fact, in the last year that he was Attorney General, the murder rate was the highest it had been since 1980. So that if that's the only judge, I think there's a real question there. Cary has repeatedly attacked my association with something called the National Council on Crime and Delinquency, and as a think tank. And I'm very proud to have been part of a think tank, because you need to start approaching these issues and looking at them from a wide perspective. Members of that board have included Lee Brown, whom I served with, who is now the drug czar, and the former and the wife of the late, recently deceased United States Supreme Court Justice Stuart Potter. It's made up of judges and law enforcement officers. It's made up of people who are part of the system and people outside the system that say it's not working. We have to figure out ways to solve it.
You've raised 2 points that warrant
And that's why I support the death
rebuttal.
penalty. I support boot camps for first-time offenders. I think that is very important, and I would appoint judges who understand that they enforce the law, not to write the law.
All right, I'm sorry, we'll get to you, Senator, but let me get Cary Edwards to respond to crime rate going up 9% while you were Attorney General, and murder rate at a record high in your final year, and also to why you've attacked Mrs. Whitman's membership in the National Council on Crime and Delinquency.
Well, I think Mrs. Whitman should come out of her think tank and out of the hills of Far Hills and Somerset County and down into the streets where I grew up. I grew up in East Patterson, New Jersey. I've arrested people, I've prosecuted people, I've run that criminal justice system. I understand what the problem in crime is in New Jersey, and I don't think my opponents do. And I don't think they really understand it. During the years of the Kane administration, in which I was setting the criminal justice public policy of the state, and as Attorney General, the crime rate per thousand on uniform crime reports went down 14% in this state. We were making real headway, and I want to finish that job.
So her numbers are wrong.
Her numbers are wrong. She's going on raw numbers.
Report.
You have to add the population. It's numbers of crime. But I'm not going to argue that crime is out of control.
What about the National Council on Crime and Delinquency, which is a San Francisco-based reform group that you have
started in Hackensack.
Started in Hackensack.
It doesn't matter where they were started. They have a philosophy that was rejected in New Jersey in 1979 when we penal code, and that is that their first priority in sentencing is rehabilitation, and their second is punishment. We purposefully reversed that to make the first priority of sentencing punishment and the second priority rehabilitation. She believes in letting people go sooner.
Cary, don't try to talk about what I believe.
She can't change her position for an election that she's had for 23 years. She's changed and flip-flopped over and over.
All right, Mr. Edwards. Senator, let's let you in here.
Okay. I gotta. Let me be in the middle. It's a comfortable position to be.
I thought you wanted to be on the right.
As West Point graduate and a former Army officer. I served as a combat engineer company commander over in Germany. I certainly know the military, I know discipline, and I know what needs to be done so far as crime is concerned. When I was in the legislature, I was the only senator that voted against Mr. Wallent's confirmation to the Supreme Court Chief Justice. Mr. Wallent has subverted the death penalty. I strongly support the death penalty. I support mandatory provisions for the career criminals. I proposed, because I know my military background, I know Fort Dix, so we have a boot camp at Fort Dix, and then we take the soldiers from Fort Dix, the ones that were the drill sergeants, and use them in the role models and tough disciplinarians, because I think that if we take 15 and 16-year-olds and we can straighten them out before they become career criminals, so much the better, and that's going to help things. So I think that I have a good, solid program, but I also want to see police out in the community interacting with community people to make sure that we can prevent crime. That's the most important thing. And the final thing I want to say, Michael, is we have to have good jobs provided for people. As a businessman, I know that a good job is #1 in reducing crime and preventing crime.
All right, Senator, excuse me one second. Sir, you said that you favor mandatory sentencing, and Mrs. Whitman, Mr. Edwards says that
for career criminals.
For career criminals, that you were part of this organization that put rehabilitation first and punishment second. You did come out with a crime plan yesterday.
Right,
it did not call for extending mandatory sentencing as Mr. Edwards would for crimes against senior citizens. Are you? Why are you against extending mandatory?
It called for increasing penalties. Well, you know, Cary said it, I thought, very well. At one point, he said that mandatory minimums, he believed, were just a Band-Aid to the problem. And what I call for is extending the penalties and letting the judiciary make the decision that's necessary to put those people away as they need to be put. But we have to have some judicial discretion to ensure that you are putting in the cells the people who absolutely must be there, because we need to ensure that we protect our citizens and our people. We have a terrible overcrowding situation now, and the worst thing in the world is to see cases come through and get plea bargains because people are worried about there not being space for them in the jails and the prisons. We have got to ensure that those who commit crimes serve their time. And we have got to ensure that we allow for, that's why I've called for extending the penalty on those who commit crimes against children and extending the death penalty to those who mastermind crimes that end in a person's death, not just the person who wields the weapon.
One thing here, Michael, on Mrs. Whitman's crime package, I think that she should retract the idea of putting a special license plate on cars for people that were drunk drivers or possible criminals. I think that's a bad idea. I think
we can agree to disagree, and that's why those things are proposals. That's why you have discussions. That's why you put ideas out. I'm not afraid to say if something should change. You know, this is something that comes out of growth and discussion.
Last word on crime, Mr. Edwards.
Michael, fundamentally, I have a very comprehensive crime package as part of this plan for New Jersey's future that hangs together with the other two pieces. It basically says, and I'm going to draw a line in the sand, right now a kid on the streets of this state and criminals believe that they can break the law, and if they get caught, they're unlucky. If they get punished, they're stupid. I will draw a line in the sand. And I can promise you this, the streets will be safer, crime will be reduced after 4 years of me being governor. And I'm going to take it one more step further. If I have not delivered on that promise, and I don't make many in public life, I will not run for re-election in this state.
But, excuse me, that was the last one. I want to turn now to the subtext that has gone on in this campaign over the last 3 months. The question of electability. Republicans want to nominate someone who can beat Jim Florio in the fall. Jim Florio may not be so easy to beat in the fall, or you may disagree with that. Mr. Edwards, you've said that you're the only one of these three who can beat Jim Florio in the fall. Do you really think so? And if so, why?
It's a very serious business, Mike, running for governor. And the public in a general election, when all 7.5 million people are engaged, have a way of discerning the difference between those who can govern and those who can't. We in the Republican Party have historically made very bad choices about people who can and can't. It is a very serious business, and it's a life and death business. I believe that being governor of this state requires experiences in life. I grew up in a single-parent household. I've worked through high school, college, law school with scholarships. I know what it's like to struggle in business. Jim Wallwork, to the contrary's opinion notwithstanding. And I've been involved in every level of government. I've done some things right and some things wrong. This is a 65,000 employee, $15 billion service business. It's not a job for amateurs, and it is about life and death. And I sincerely believe that my opponents in this race have very different positions than I do, and I sincerely believe those positions are naive. I don't dislike them. I don't think they can run against the governor. I helped Tom Kean set up the power of the incumbency, and I've seen it. The communication power is awesome. Jim Florio is the most skilled, mechanical politician that's ever come on the scene in the state of New Jersey. He is going to be difficult to beat in any day, at any time. And Republicans are at a disadvantage. And I believe we should put forth our most experienced candidate in life, in business, and in government, because it's not a job for amateurs.
Let me stop you there and ask you, Christy Whitman, why you feel that you're best suited to run against Jim.
One of the things that Cary said is this is not a job for amateurs, but I would argue that part of the problem we've had over the last 3.5 years is that we've had professional politicians running the show, and that's part of the problem. You know, we bring different experiences, different life experience to the perspective of governor. Cary sort of maintains that, or implies, I guess is a better way of saying it, that I don't have experience. And clearly I do. Management experience, having been as a freeholder. I know government at the local level. I know it at the state level as having been on the Board of Public Utilities. I bring my experience as a mother. I bring what I've done for the last 3.5 years, listening and talking with the state. You bring different experiences to it. What you have to have is the real commitment to change. I know what works in government. I know what doesn't work in government, and I know we can change it. Believe me, I know we can do it, but it does take the kind of leadership that's dedicated and understands it isn't me. No one individual, no one party has all the answers. It's going to take everybody out here being part of the process, and you have to be willing to really commit yourself to that kind of an open government.
Right, let me ask Senator Wallwork to comment on the question in this fashion. You jumped into the race after your two opponents disclosed that they had hired illegal aliens and had failed to pay taxes on. You said at the time that they were tarnished candidates. Do you still think so? And is that why you think you're the only Republican who can beat Jim Florio?
Well, Michael, look, I'm a businessman. I've run a business successfully for 25 years. So I've met a payroll, I paid my Social Security taxes, I provided health care benefits. I know and I relate to the working men and women of the state of New Jersey. And what people want is they want less taxes, they want government off their backs, they want a conservative viewpoint, and that's what I bring to this race. Beyond that, I served 16 years in the legislature, so I know the nuts and bolts of state. And I served 8 of those 16 years representing all of Essex County, a highly urban county, 900,000 people. And as a Republican, I represented Newark, Irvington, East Orange, tough urban areas. I got Democrat, independent votes as well as Republican votes, and I was elected, re-elected, and re-elected. So I'm a good campaigner. I don't take my hat off to anybody. And let me just add that I believe that my West Point training and my military background, served 4 years on active duty, 11 more years in the National Guard. A governor's a leader, and I have leader qualities from my military experience, my political and governmental experience, and my business experience, and I don't have the baggage that the other candidates have.
Let me stop.
So Florio cannot attack me. It's going to be an issue between liberalism and conservatism, less taxes, less government, and big government.
And Senator, when was the last time that a conservative won a statewide general election in New Jersey?
It doesn't make any difference. The people, look, I am conservative fiscally, and that's what people in New Jersey want. I'm a conservative fiscally. I'm moderate on a lot of issues. We're all pro-choice here. That's not an issue. The issue is it's going to be clear-cut. Do the people of the state of New Jersey want bigger government, more regulations, higher fees, strangling jobs, and driving people out of the state, or do they want a businessman who's conservative, who's going to have less taxes, less government, and less spending?
All right. Both of you gentlemen have suggested in so many ways, and even here this evening with your comment about public school and your emphasis on public school, that because Mrs. Whitman comes from a wealthy background, that she is somehow out of touch with common people. You've never implied that?
It has nothing to do with the wealthy background. It has to do with the background. And it has to do with the real experiences that they had. Tom Kean was a very wealthy man. But Christy Whitman is no Kane. I knew Tom Kane. I worked for Tom Kane.
He doesn't wear a skirt, last I knew.
You can, wealth is not the issue, it's your real experiences in life. This is not a game of academics. This is life and death to people. This isn't about studying an issue and, well, I guess this is what I'll do. And maybe I'll change my mind next week, which he's done on a number of occasions, and I think you should be open-minded. I don't disagree with the principles that she's talking about, the way she's not giving the voters of the state in this primary or the general election a specific vision about what she will in fact do on life and death issues in this state.
I thought you'd read my economic blueprint better than that, because you keep using the phraseology from it.
She doesn't have that background that's needed to make real decisions about education in New Jersey. It's not wealth. It has nothing to do with wealth.
All three of you are relatively wealthy.
It has nothing to do with wealth. All right.
Mrs. Whitman, do you want to respond to the suggestion that has been made, if not by your opponents, then in the media, that somehow because you come from inherited wealth, that you are out of
Actually,
touch?
my husband has made, what you saw we paid in taxes was stuff that my husband made, so he's been very successful as well. And there's no question that people are going to try to make this a class issue. And you know, that's something that's been happening to this state over the last 3 years. That kind of divisiveness goes back to the old kind of politics that we simply cannot afford to have. It's going to take people of lower income, middle income, and upper income to get this state back on track. It's not what you have in your bank account. It is what you have done with your life. It's an experience that you get from teaching English as a second language, as my husband and I did in Harlem. When you talk and work with people who care so desperately about improving their skills so they can get jobs and be contributing citizens. It's spending the time to the mothers whose children are in the intensive neonatal care units. It's holding those babies with AIDS. It's the kinds of experiences that will enable you to understand what really is driving the fears and the concerns of the people of this state, as well as talking to the business people who have lost their jobs. I talked to one fellow the other day. He had 80 employees when Jim Florio started as governor. He's now down to one himself. That's it. Those are the kinds of experiences that I bring to this.
All right, so maybe the electability question is over. Does anybody want to make any last comment about being the only one who can beat Jim Florio?
No, but I just want to say one thing. I keep hearing that this electability thing, and it amuses me just a little bit because I keep hearing that I'm not. But it's interesting that I was the first to max out. I was the first. There have been 5 Republican conventions. I've won all 5 of them. I have the Hands Across New Jersey endorsement, and I'm ahead in the polls. The people are going to decide this at the end of the day.
Christy, you haven't. Today I got my final certification on maxing out, and she has not.
Maxing out is raising the maximum amount of money to qualify for the maximum amount of public matching funds. Go ahead, Mr.
She doesn't seem to be able to get her facts straight. It took Jim Corder till the general election to misstep as many times as Christy Whitman has misstepped since January. Believe me, she can't beat Jim Florio.
Cary, one thing I'd like to say, though, you say I misstate. I would just like at any time misstate. And any time I would accept an apology from you for calling me a liar when I indicated that you had in fact filed for extensions on your taxes 3 of the last 4 years and paid penalties and fines in 4 of the last 4 years. And you said I was a liar. And you said I didn't have my facts. And you implied that that was something that had been continuous. You know you did it. It was there. You only filed the first 2 pages, but you filed them and it said there. So it said there, unless you're working on a different fiscal year, October and August are not there.
You set the standard for disclosure and didn't meet it. You set the standard. I disclosed. The reason you know exactly what's on mine is you have 11 years of my tax returns.
But you called me a liar.
Well,
you called me a liar.
Michael,
and we don't have your
We're still waiting for your disclosure.
You have ours.
Look,
All right.
Michael,
Senator.
So far as all the disclosures are, I was the first one to disclose my income taxes in 90, 91, 92 and lay it before the press, but that's a side issue. Jim Florio is not going to be easy to beat. I think he's going to be a very formidable candidate. But I think it should be a campaign on the issues, because Jim Florio has done a lot of damage to the state of New Jersey with his high taxes, with his fines and fees in the various departments. Environmental protection is the biggest one, with his unnecessary rules and regulations. And you're going to have a businessman. I've lived under these rules and regulations. I know what they are. I'm really the only experienced person. Everything that I own, my wife and I earned, and so I know what it is because I bring to this race, a business experience, but I also bring legislative experience, and I know that I can go after Jim Florio on the issues.
All right, if it's going to be on the issues, let us get back to the issues.
Okay.
Let's talk about the environment, particularly as it bumps up against the need to create jobs. We have a situation in northern New Jersey, in Port Newark and Elizabeth, where Newark Bay needs to be dredged. The Port Authority and the shipping industry and the Longshoremen's Union say business is disappearing because we're not dredging that harbor. At the same time, the mud in the harbor has dioxin, amounts of dioxin in it, and if it's dumped in the ocean where we normally dump dredged spoils, at the mud dump 6 miles off of Sandy Hook, environmentalists say we're going to contaminate the ocean, and fishermen are worried about the fish. Let me ask you, without getting into the minutiae of that issue, Mr. Edwards, in general, situations like this, are you going to give the benefit of the doubt to jobs or the environment?
That isn't a choice that anyone could ever have to make, Mike. In 1988, I wrote to End Ocean Pollution, not only in New Jersey, but across the country, based on the experiences I had.
Somebody has to make it.
I understand.
Governor Florio could stop that right now.
I hear you. And in 1988, that plan included an answer, because the mud dump site was in place, and the recommendation was there for Jim Florio to take. He also knew in 1989 that they had to dredge the harbor for jobs and to partake in this new global economy or a non-new global economy. It had to be done. That dredging has to take place, and those dredge spoils can't be dumped in the ocean. We can't afford it in New Jersey. That 127 miles of beaches, that $18 billion tourism industry that's here, that I investigated New York's dumping that caused us so much trouble back in the mid-'80s. That's what came up. And I called for the closing of that mud dump site then, and we knew the port had to be dredged then, and there should have been an alternative put in place by a real governor who wasn't just giving you rhetoric, but cared about the future and would make the tough decisions. Jim Florio doesn't make tough choices. He makes political ones. You must dredge. If you got to put it in a barge and test it and find out where you can do it, you've got to dredge that. The jobs are too important. Our futures, our families, the entire economy of the Northeast is dependent on that dredging. And whatever it costs to do it that way, but we in New Jersey can also not allow those dredge spoils to be dumped off our beaches.
All right. Mrs. Whitman, you want to respond to the question?
Absolutely, because when I was down in Sandy Hook about 2 weeks working on that beach cleanup there, you know, you can look out and you can see where they're talking about dumping that sludge, and we cannot allow that to happen. But we have to have the dredging. I agree. There is no question about it. We are a hub state. We have the ability to move our produce if we just free ourselves from some of the problems we have. Part of that is that super tankers can't get into our harbors because of the sludge, the way it is built up. I support the barge alternative because over a 3-year period, I believe I've watched technology develop. We will figure a technology. There's an experiment going on in the Great Lakes right now to try to clean sludge, to take out the dioxins. That's what we have to do. We have to have the dredging. We need the jobs. We have got to reinvigorate our harbors. At the same time, we absolutely cannot allow that filled dredge spoil to be dumped off Sandy Hook down there.
Senator Wallwork, maybe this wasn't such a good question because they won't choose between jobs and the environment, will you?
Well, look, I don't think you have to choose between jobs and the environment. I'm a businessman, but I also served 4 years as chairman of the Senate Environment Committee, and I had a good record in the environment. There's no question in my judgment, dioxin is a carcinogen. You cannot dump it 6 miles off. The ocean is not a garbage heap. And we cannot continue to dump things in the ocean. I'm for clean oceans because that's vital to the economy of the state and it's vital to the healthy well-being of the families that are bathing along the shore, as an example, and it's a magnet, of course, for our industry of tourism. So I believe that we have to seal this sludge in containers, and I would say as governor, let the Port Authority come up with all their expertise, and let's have a real open discussion as to what can be done with this dioxin. I don't think anybody really knows. I read in the paper today, well, there's only about as much dioxin in all the sludge that would fill a small little bottle about an eyedropper size. I don't know what the facts are because the Port Authority has really not educated the public. So I think we need the Port Authority to give us the expert and the answer to the solution, because we have to do the dredging, but it can definitely not go into the ocean.
All right, one more subject, very quickly, quick response.
The issue is much deeper than that, Mike, and it's not just the sludge dumping. There is a balance, and one of the toughest jobs of the next governor of the state is going to be to make that balance between the economy and our environment. Our regulatory environment is broken. It has to be fixed. I can fix it. We had to do that at motor vehicles, and I've got a record of doing it. But making those choices are one of the toughest jobs the next governor of New Jersey has to make. We did that one successfully, but there's hundreds of more out there. And believe me, the question is far more difficult to answer.
All right, let's talk about the bond business and competitive bidding. Last week, coincident with a federal investigation of the sale of New Jersey Turnpike Authority bonds, Governor Florio carried through on old campaign promise and declared that from here on out, by executive order, all bond underwriting business from the state of New Jersey would be doled out through competitive bidding. Mrs. Whitman, would you continue that order as governor, and would you urge the legislature to make it law and extend it to all state, all county, local, and authority bonding work as well?
I would certainly vote
to make it law and extend it to all state, all county, local, and authority bonding work as well.
I would certainly I would certainly, as governor, extend that order, because every issuance of a bond, every issuance of a contract has got to be able to stand the scrutiny of the light of day. That's part of why when I went out before the Sports and Exposition Authority and called for its privatization, part of what I was saying is what happened in that bond extension went on there was done, and this administration has done it over and over again, was done at 12:30 in the morning in the last days of the last legislature. Never went before the people. That hasn't happened before, and if it's not against, and it's not the actual letter of the Constitution, it's certainly against the intent of the Constitution. We have got to stop this extension of bonded indebtedness that is mortgaging our future, not managing it. The last one that was passed when we refinanced from taking a bond from $1.4 billion to $1.8 billion, you know, municipalities, when they want a bond and want to refinance, have to go and prove that they're making a savings of at least 3%. This was even just barely 1%, plus it extended it. We're going to spend over time between the years 1997, because we put off payment for a few years to make it look better, to the year 2017, we're going to spend over $650 million extra. We didn't gain anything from that. We've lost. And we have got to ensure that we submit all those kinds of awards of contracts and bonding to the people. They've got to know what's going on. It's their right.
So Governor Florio did the right thing last week.
He finally did, yes. A little bit like closing the barn door after the horse is out, but he did the right thing.
Senator Wallwork?
Michael, when I was in the State Senate, I had introduced legislation for a two-step program for bidding. And it would have included bonds, but it would have included professional services such as architects, engineers, public relations people. There's a whole area out there where it has to be reformed, not just the bonds, but in these other areas of technical services I've just mentioned, plus others. I had a two-step type of proposal where you would make a bid, and it would be a technical type of a bid, and only you would make that bid if you were an engineer or an architect or in the bonds, and then they would qualify that individual or that company and say, all right, now you're qualified in the first step. Those that weren't qualified would step aside, and now maybe you'd have 3 or 4 bidding, and then in the second step you would only bid on your proposal, and then whatever the lowest bid was with the best engineering or the best result would be the winner. So it was a two-step bid. Governor Florio should take that legislation and put it before the legislature now. Had we done that in 1975, when I introduced it in the State Senate, we wouldn't have this mess today. Also, I had a municipal bond bank bill where you could have municipalities going into a central bond bank. You wouldn't have all the individual municipalities floating bonds. They would do it through a bond bank. It would be cheaper, it would be more effective, and would eliminate a lot of this so-called political patronage. So I had the programs 15 years ago.
All right, Senator. Mr. Edwards, your law firm does do bond counsel work. From that vantage point, what do you think of what Governor Florio did last week?
Absolutely.
The right thing.
The right thing. He promised to do it 3 years ago when he was running and didn't install it. I represent my firm. I moved this firm to New Jersey, and ironic, I listened to Mr. Wallwork as a businessman. I created 100 jobs over the last 3 years here in New Jersey, running a national and international firm.
Yeah, but you've been running for governor for 2
A national and international firm. You know, I have not. I've been putting that law firm together, and maybe if I had been...
but I ran for 25 years of business, Cary.
Anyway, let me see if I can deal with the crux of the issue rather than Senator Wallwork's ravings. I do believe there should be open and competitive bidding. I do understand how the business works. My law firm, I think, is one of the nationally recognized finest public finance law firms in the country, and I'm very proud of that. And I'm very proud to have brought that firm to New Jersey. And we do about 55–60% of our business in litigation and various others. But open and competitive bidding, so we get the finest services for the least amount of money in public finance is what we need. Jim Florio promised it in 1989 and didn't deliver it till a week ago. We have increased our bonded indebtedness in the state of New Jersey by 40% in 3 years. It took us 200 years to get this far, and we increased it by 40. We have become too dependent on bond and public indebtedness to finance our operations in the state of New Jersey. Very dangerous precedent.
You agree with Mrs. Whitman on that point. Let's move on. We're rapidly running out of time. Let's spend about 3 or 4 minutes, if we could, figuring out which of the three of you can do the most for New Jersey's cities which need help. Who?
Well, I'll start on that because I represented urban areas for 8 of my 16 years in the legislature. And I've sponsored a number of bills to help the cities. I think, Michael, the biggest thing in the cities is having decent housing. It all stems from having a decent home environment, and that's what we have to provide. And as governor, I would be stressing, because we have the built-in facilities, we have the infrastructure. We must now move back in, and we must stabilize in these various communities, give people an opportunity to own their own home. Urban homesteading, sweat equity, whatever the case may be, and I proposed this when I was in the state senate, to begin to rebuild in the neighborhoods, urban centers. I would put my emphasis here rather than trying to build housing, affordable housing all over the state of New Jersey. I think it should be here where we the environment and improve the quality of life for people living in Newark and Jersey City.
That's one good idea, and I only have time for one thought out of each of you on this.
I'm not getting much time here.
I'm trying to keep it equal. Let's hear what Mrs. Whitman would do for the cities.
The best thing that we can do for the cities is to get the state's fiscal house in order and provide the kinds of incentives to small businesses and job creation that is going to create jobs there so people will want to live in the cities. Repair the education system so they can feel confident that their children are going to get the education they need and not be handicapped because they're living in the cities. But the basic thing that we have to understand is that government is not going to do it all. It has to happen from within, and there are many people in each of these communities who care deeply about it. I've been part, as president of the Community Foundation of New Jersey, of something called Neighborhood Leadership Initiative. Department of Community Affairs was involved with that agency, with the Community Foundation, in doing that. We brought people from these communities who had ideas. We gave them the training and skills they needed to be able to implement, and then gave them some dollars to be able to do it. Public-private partnership is another way to empower those people who really live it day in and day out.
I'm sorry,
and who really care.
I have to stop you there, Mr. Edwards. A minute on what an Edwards administration would do for the cities.
They're both fundamentally missing the point. New Jersey and this nation has dealt with urban problems for over 30 years, and we failed. No one wants to live in an environment or work in an environment that's not safe to work and live in. No one wants to raise their children in a city or a town in which the education system is failing. And no one can work and live in a place where there isn't a decent job. We need to get back to the fundamentals. All of these programs, government programs, are treating symptoms, not the virus. And until we provide safe streets and an education system that works, we're not going to solve our problems with urban New Jersey. And New Jersey is the most urbanized state in the nation. There aren't 5 or 6 cities, there's 50 of them. And it is the most difficult problem a governor and the next governor of this state can face. I have promised at editorial boards around the state that I will deliver a detailed urban agenda and how I believe government should interface in that. Because only government can provide safe streets and run the education.
I'm sorry, Senator. I have one more question, and we only have time for one more go-around.
Okay.
It's an important question. I'll start with you.
Why me?
What are the first two things, and you have less than a minute to answer this, what are the first two things you're going to do as governor if you win in November?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do before I'm sworn in is I'm going to appoint a task force of qualified men and women, engineers, experts, to go through every rule and regulation that we have in the state of New Jersey, to strip out the unneeded rules and regulations, because these are the rules and regulations that are stifling business and killing jobs.
What's the other thing?
The other thing is I'm going to go right after the budget. I don't have to wait, Cary, for a year after I'm sworn in, because the governor will be proposing a new budget in January or February. I'm going to use the line item veto. Whatever I have to do, we're going to cut. We're going to cut that budget, and we're going to help people get jobs in the private sector.
All right. Mrs. Whitman, what are the first two things you're going to do if you become governor in November?
First thing is to implement...
you become governor in January. Go ahead.
January. The first thing I do would be to implement the decisions that have come forward from the task force that I appointed the day after I was elected to do the performance audit of each and every agency and department within state government to ensure that we have government that delivers the services. The second thing I do is appoint that business and industry council that I have talked about to allow the business people to have input to the governor's office to start to point out some of the biggest roadblocks that are stopping development and stopping growth in the state of New Jersey.
Mr. Edwards, what are the first two things you would do if you win the election?
You have 21 days from the time that you're sworn in to recommend a budget to the legislature. That budget will be both your spending and policy document. It must be jobs-oriented and reducing taxes. The legislature can't adopt that budget until June of that year, and those tax cuts won't be effective until January of 1995.
Very quickly, the first two things you will do.
The tax reductions are designed to move this economy in this state forward. The second thing I would do is put that auditor in place so I can fix the DEPE and let business grow and mature in the state.
All right. We're out of time for questions. We do have closing statements slotted for this point in the debate. And you each have 90 seconds, and by a toss of the coin, Mrs. Whitman, you go first.
Well, I want to again thank the sponsors for tonight's debate, the Chamber and NJN, for giving us this opportunity, giving the voters this opportunity to see the various candidates. There are differences. There are differences in objectives and in goals. And we have got to understand that this state demands fundamental change. The focus of this has got to be, this state has got to be providing the jobs and the support for the people of the state of New Jersey. That's only going to come from a real commitment and understanding that the people deserve and are a part of that process. And that's why it becomes so critically important that as we look at the future of the state of New Jersey, as you, the voters, make your decision as to whom to support in this primary, you look to see where are the commitments to really doing things differently? Where are the commitments and the understanding that you have a role to play and that you have a right to be heard and you must be heard? Because together we can make New Jersey #1 again. Not #1 in taxes, not #1 in unemployment, not #1 in regulation, but #1 in ideas, innovation, and growth. And that's what my focus is.
The next closing goes to Senator Wallwork.
All right, thank you, Michael. You've done an excellent job here tonight, and so have the hosts, so I appreciate that very much. New Jersey's a great state. We have a lot of great people in our state, everybody. But we've lost our way, especially over the last 3 years under the Florio high taxes, the unnecessary rules and regulations. And I believe that we need a good conservative businessman to come in and make a difference as governor. The other day, my wife and I were visiting in Hackettstown, and I came across a young woman, 26 years of age. She had 2 children. She was working, had her own little business, but she was struggling. And her husband also had a job. He had been ill last year, and they had run up $1,100 worth of bills, $11,000 rather, worth of hospital bills. She said, I don't know how I'm going to pay for this. And I knew this was a good family because the 2 little girls were there. The 7-year-old girl had a reading book, and she was reading. And the young woman, the mother, said, I never had an opportunity to go to college, but I'm going to make sure, no matter what it takes, that my 2 daughters will go to college. And my heart went out to this young woman because she's struggling. And she's just one of thousands of New Jersey people out there struggling, trying to make ends meet. And that's the challenge that we face. That's why I'm running for governor, because I want to work with the men and women throughout New Jersey, southern New Jersey, central New Jersey, northern New Jersey, all of us. We have a great state. I want to provide with you, working together, the leadership, and I promise everybody I will be a governor you can be proud of.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. The final closing statement, 90 seconds, Cary Edwards.
Michael, thank you very much, and thank the Chamber of Commerce and NJN and the people in this audience and our listeners out there who have been watching this program. I hope this program has given you all an opportunity to get more insight into what this election is about, how important this election is, that it is an election about electing a governor who will make life and death decisions for the future of the people of New Jersey. We've put forward a plan to get back to basics in New Jersey, to do the fundamental things that New Jersey state government should be doing, and to get government out of the way from those things that it shouldn't be doing, to provide safe streets, to provide an atmosphere in which we can have jobs, reduce taxes and cut spending, get government out of the way, to provide an education system that works for our children, for real children. It is our responsibility as we go through this election process to tell you who we are and what we stand for. It is your responsibility to listen and to vote on June 8th. And when you do, I hope you'll have read my plan for New Jersey's future. I hope you'll look carefully at my background and my experience and the skill that I have, not only to have a vision, but to make that vision a reality. I've proven it. We've done it. We can do it again. We can create a new New Jersey, one for you and one for me, one for our children and one for our grandchildren, and a New Jersey we can all be proud of, where there is a job, where there are safe streets, and where our children do get an education. And thank you all very much for taking the time to listen.
All right. That's it from here. I want to thank our audience. I want to thank the candidates for a good debate. Thank the Chamber for hosting this debate, co-hosting it with NJN. There will be one more debate before the primary election, one more televised debate on NJN. The primary is 4 weeks from tonight. I'm Michael Aron from Whippany. We're going to go back to the studio now, and Kent Manahan. Kent?